March 8, 2026, 0637 hours local time, the Strait of Hormuz. A distress signal hits every maritime receiver within 200 nautical miles. International Channel 16. Unencrypted. A voice speaking broken English, identifying itself as the Iranian frigate IRIS Sahand, reporting catastrophic engine room fire, requesting immediate assistance. 31 nautical miles to the southeast, the USS Truxtun, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, picks up the signal in 4 seconds flat. The watch officer logs the transmission, timestamps it, routes it to the Combat Information Center. Standard maritime law is unambiguous. A vessel in distress must be rendered assistance. The 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Solace Chapter 5. The U.S. Navy's own standing orders. Every mariner knows the rule. You hear a distress call, you respond. The Truxtun's commanding officer, Commander Eric Halstead, reaches for the handset to contact 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. What happens over the next 11 hours will trigger a diplomatic firestorm, expose an Iranian intelligence operation, and force the Pentagon to choose between two things the U.S. Navy holds sacred: the duty to rescue and the duty to protect its own. I'm your host at Navy Axis, where we break down the most critical naval operations shaping global power. Today, we're reconstructing a decision that split the maritime world in half. Because when a warship ignores a sinking vessel, there's always a reason. And this time, that reason was hiding beneath the surface. To understand why 5th Fleet made the call it did, you need to understand what the Strait of Hormuz looked like in early March 2026. Tension had been escalating since late 2025. In November, IRGC naval forces conducted their largest ever exercise in the Strait, Operation Great Prophet 19. Over 400 fast attack craft, dozens of armed drones, and at least 6 Ghadir-class midget submarines participated. Iran's message was clear. We own these waters. The United States disagreed. By January 2026, the Navy had reinforced its 5th Fleet presence. The USS Bataan Amphibious Ready Group moved into the Gulf of Oman. A Virginia-class attack submarine, reportedly the USS Minnesota, was operating somewhere in the Arabian Sea. P-8, a Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, flew daily sorties over the strait. And the Truxtun, DDG-103, displacement 9,700 tons, 96 vertical launch cells loaded with a mix of SM-2, SM-6, and Tomahawk missiles. SPY-1D radar scanning everything within 250 nautical miles. A ship designed to fight wars, not to pull sailors off sinking frigates. But the laws of the sea don't care about geopolitics. A distress call is a distress call. At 0641, Commander Halstead transmitted his request to Naval Support Activity Bahrain. 5th Fleet Operations Center received it within seconds. The request was straightforward: permission to close range on the Sahand and render assistance per standing maritime obligations. The response didn't come for 19 minutes. That delay was the first sign something was wrong. In a standard maritime rescue scenario, the approval chain is short. Ship's captain assesses the situation, informs Fleet Command, and begins maneuvering toward the distressed vessel while waiting for formal authorization. Time matters. Ships sink. Halstead didn't maneuver. He held position. Because the 19-minute silence from Bahrain wasn't silence at all. It was 5th Fleet running the distress call through every intelligence filter they had, and those filters were screaming. The first anomaly was geographic. The Sahand's distress signal reported its position as 26 degrees 33 minutes north, 56 degrees 15 minutes east, roughly 12 nautical miles off Keshem Island in Iranian territorial waters. But the National Reconnaissance Office had been tracking the Sahand by satellite since it left Bandar Abbas 48 hours earlier. According to overhead imagery updated 17 minutes before the distress call, the Sahand was actually 14 nautical miles further west, in the traffic separation scheme's outbound lane, a 14 nautical mile discrepancy, on a ship with GPS, GLONASS, and inertial navigation. That doesn't happen by accident. The second anomaly was procedural. The Sahand reported a catastrophic engine room fire threatening to sink the vessel. Standard Iranian naval procedure for a Class Alpha fire calls for immediate deployment of life rafts and activation of the ship's emergency position indicating radio beacon. The Sahand's EPIRB never activated. No life rafts were observed by satellite. The crew was supposedly fighting a fire that would sink them, yet the ship showed no visible smoke plume on thermal imagery taken at 0644. No smoke, no EPIRB, no life rafts, but a crystal-clear distress call on an international frequency. The third anomaly came from the National Security Agency. At 0623, 14 minutes before the Sahand transmitted its distress signal, NSA's signals intelligence platforms intercepted a burst transmission from IRGC Navy headquarters on Farsi Island. The transmission was encrypted using a military cipher, but the metadata was revealing. It was addressed to 6 separate receivers. All 6 corresponded to known IRGC fast attack craft operating bases along the northern shore of the strait. 14 minutes before a frigate calls for help, the IRGC orders 6 attack boat units to do something. That's not a coincidence. That's a playbook. 5th Fleet's Intelligence Section, working alongside the Office of Naval Intelligence Liaison at NSA Bahrain, assembled a threat picture within those 19 minutes that changed everything. The assessment concluded with moderate to high confidence that the Sahand's distress was either fabricated or, at minimum, being exploited by the IRGC to create a tactical opportunity. At 0700, Rear Admiral Catherine Voss, commander of Task Force 55, delivered the order personally via secure voice to Commander Halstead. Do not approach. Maintain current position. Monitor by air only. Halstead acknowledged the order. The Truxtun stayed put, but the situation was far from over. At 0712, the Sahand broadcast a second distress call, this time more urgent. The voice claimed the fire had spread to the forward magazine. They reported the ship listing 9 degrees to port. They requested any vessel in the area to render immediate assistance. International Maritime Monitoring Agencies picked up the call. So did commercial shipping. The container ship Maersk Durban, transiting the strait on a routine passage from Dubai to Singapore, altered course and began closing the distance to the Sahand's reported position. The Truxtun's communications officer contacted the Maersk Durban directly, warned them that the tactical situation was not as it appeared. The container ship's master, uncertain but unwilling to ignore a distress call, continued his approach. At 0726, Commander Halstead made a judgment call. He launched the ship's MH-60R Seahawk helicopter with orders to establish a visual on the Sahand at maximum standoff range, no closer than 8 nautical miles. The helicopter crew reported back at 0738. What they described didn't match a ship in extremis. The Sahand was indeed listing approximately 5 to 7 degrees to port, but there was no visible fire, no smoke. The crew appeared to be on deck, not fighting a blaze. One crew member was observed on the fantail doing what appeared to be routine maintenance, on a ship that claimed its forward magazine was about to cook off. Lieutenant Commander James Ortiz, the Seahawk's mission commander, noted one additional detail in his report. 2 small craft, consistent in size and configuration with IRGC Paycap-class fast attack boats, were holding station approximately 6 nautical miles northeast of the Sahand's actual position. They were running without AIS transponders. Dark. 2 boats sitting quietly in a spot you'd have to pass through to reach the frigate. The threat picture was solidifying, and it was ugly. By 0800, ONI had correlated the morning's intercepts with historical pattern analysis. What they found was alarming. IRGC naval forces had conducted at least 3 similar operations between 2019 and 2024. Scenarios involving a vessel in apparent distress used to draw foreign warships into confined waterways where fast attack craft could engage at close range. The tactics even had a name in Iranian military doctrine: ensnaring lure, a deception operation designed to neutralize the technological advantages of a superior naval force by controlling the engagement geometry. The Strait of Hormuz is perfect for this. At its narrowest point, it's only 21 nautical miles wide. The shipping lanes compress into a corridor less than 6 miles across. For a destroyer like the Truxtun, Operating in that confined space means reduced radar coverage, limited maneuvering room, and drastically shortened reaction times against fast-moving threats. An Arleigh Burke in open ocean has a defensive radius measured in hundreds of miles. In the Strait, that radius collapses to minutes, maybe seconds. And the IRGC knows this better than anyone. The PACAP-class fast attack boats are small, roughly 13 meters. They carry either a twin 23mm cannon or anti-ship missiles, depending on the variant. Their top speed exceeds 50 knots. In a swarm of 6, coordinated to attack from multiple bearings simultaneously, they can saturate a destroyer's close-in weapon systems. The math is brutal. A Phalanx CIWS can engage one target at a time. The 5-inch gun can shift targets, but slowly compared to the closing speed of a boat doing 50 knots. An SM-2 or SM-6 is designed for aircraft and missiles, not speedboats skimming the wave tops. This is the IRGC's entire theory of naval warfare. Don't fight the U.S. Navy symmetrically. Don't try to match Aegis radar or Tomahawk missiles or carrier air wings. Instead, draw them into your water. Close the distance. Swarm. Turn their billion-dollar destroyers into targets for million-dollar boats. If you're watching this and you've studied Iranian naval strategy, comment A if you think the Sahand operation was pre-planned from the start. B if you think the IRGC opportunistically exploited a real emergency, or C if you believe it was a genuine distress and the US overreacted. I want to see what you think. By 0830, the situation had climbed the chain of command to CENTCOM headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. General Marcus Bridwell, CENTCOM commander, was briefed on the developing picture. The intelligence was compelling but not conclusive. There was no intercept of an explicit IRGC order saying, "This is a trap." There was circumstantial evidence, strong circumstantial evidence, but a commanding officer ordering a warship to ignore a distress call based on circumstantial evidence carries enormous legal and moral risk. General Bridwell convened a secure video conference with Rear Admiral Voss, the Truxtun's battle group commander, and the senior ONI representative. The discussion lasted 22 minutes. The options were clear. Option 1, send the Truxtun in. Fulfill the maritime rescue obligation. Accept the risk of an IRGC engagement. Mitigate through combat air patrol and submarine positioning. Option 2, hold position, monitor remotely. Offer coordination through International Maritime Organization channels for a third-party rescue. Accept the diplomatic consequences of refusing to assist. Option 3, send only helicopters for close observation. If genuine distress is confirmed visually, launch a rescue mission with combat escort. Bridwell chose a modified version of Option 3. Helicopters would maintain observation. A P-8A Poseidon already airborne over the Gulf of Oman would be redirected to the Strait for subsurface surveillance. The Virginia-class submarine operating in the area would be repositioned to provide early warning of any Ghadir-class submarine activity. The Truxtun would not move. This was not a decision made lightly. Commander Halstead's crew included sailors who had conducted dozens of search and rescue operations throughout their careers. The impulse to help a vessel in distress is drilled into every mariner from day one. Ignoring that call goes against training, tradition, and law. But force protection is also a standing order. And when the intelligence picture tells you that responding to a distress call might get your ship attacked and your crew killed, the calculation changes. At 0847, the Maersk Durban reached a position 4 nautical miles from the Sahand's reported coordinates. The container ship's crew observed the frigate and reported back via VHF radio. Their assessment matched the Seahawk crew's observations. The Sahand was listing but intact, no fire visible. No crew abandoning ship. The Maersk Durban's master made his own judgment call. He stopped his approach and resumed course towards Singapore. At 0915, a new development. The Truxtun's electronic warfare suite detected radar emissions from 2 NOR anti-ship missile seekers. The emissions lasted less than 3 seconds, consistent with a test activation or pre-launch warm-up, not a full engagement sequence. The bearing traced back to the area where the 2 dark PACAP boats had been observed. Someone was painting the Truxtun with missile radar. Briefly, provocatively. 3 seconds of radar energy. That's all it takes to change the character of an encounter from ambiguous to hostile. Commander Halstead ordered the ship to general quarters. The Truxtun's crew of 329 moved to battle stations in under 4 minutes. Phalanx CYWS activated to autonomous mode. Electronic warfare systems began jamming on preset frequencies. SM-2 Block 3C missiles in cells 1 through 8 were brought to ready status. For 7 minutes, the Truxtun was prepared to fight. Then the radar emissions stopped. The PACAP boats turned northeast and increased speed. They were leaving. General quarters stood down at 0941, but the crew remained at heightened readiness for the next 6 hours. The P-8A Poseidon arrived on station at 0953 and began dropping sonobuoys in a pattern designed to detect any submarine activity in the approaches to the Sahand. The results confirmed the worst suspicions. 2 subsurface contacts were detected operating at low speed in the underwater terrain between Kesham Island and Larak Island, precisely along the route the Truxtun would have taken to reach the frigate, Gadir-class midget submarines, displacement approximately 120 tons, armed with 2 533mm heavyweight torpedoes each, nearly silent on battery power at low speed. In the shallow, acoustically complex waters of the strait, they are extraordinarily difficult to detect. They were waiting. 2 submarines, 6 fast attack boats, missile radar activated against the Truxtun, a distress signal that didn't match observable reality. The trap was real. The intelligence assessment had been correct. At 11:47, the Iranian Navy dispatched 2 Hendajan-class tugs from Bandar Abbas. They reached the Sahand at 14:30. By 1700, the frigate was under tow, heading back to port at 4 knots. No crew evacuated, no casualties reported, no fire damage visible on later satellite imagery of the ship in Bandar Abbas. The Sahand returned to port, looking exactly like a ship that had never been on fire. The aftermath unfolded on 2 tracks, military and diplomatic. On the military side, the encounter was designated SIGACT Gulf-2026-037 and classified at the TS-SCI level. The after-action review conducted at 5th Fleet Headquarters concluded that IRGC naval forces had executed a deliberate deception operation intended to draw USS Truxtun into an engagement zone. The report identified 3 key components of the trap: the false distress signal as bait, fast attack craft positioned for a swarming attack, and Gadir submarines providing a kill layer beneath the surface. The review also identified a vulnerability. The Truxtun's sonar suite, primarily designed for blue water anti-submarine warfare, struggled to maintain consistent tracks on the Gadir submarines in the strait's shallow waters. Sound bouncing off the seabed, thermoclines created by warm Gulf currents, and biological noise from the dense marine environment all degraded detection. The P-8A's sonobuoys performed better, but required the aircraft to remain on station, not always possible in contested airspace. This gap was noted for urgent capability development. If the IRGC could position submarines in the strait with reasonable confidence they wouldn't be detected, the implications extended far beyond one incident. On the diplomatic track, the fallout was immediate and intense. Iran's foreign ministry issued a formal protest within hours. Ambassador Kazem Sajjadpour addressed the International Maritime Organization's Maritime Safety Committee within 72 hours, demanding formal censure of the United States for deliberate and unconscionable violation of the most fundamental principle of maritime law, the duty to render assistance to vessels in distress. The presentation was polished. Iran provided VHF recordings of the distress calls. Testimony from the Sahand's commanding officer describing the engine room fire in vivid detail, photographs purporting to show fire damage in the engineering spaces. The United States responded through its own permanent representative. The American presentation was notably restrained. It did not directly accuse Iran of staging the incident. It did not reveal the intelligence that had driven the decision. It stated only that force protection considerations, consistent with inherent rights of self-defense recognized under international law, required a modified response posture. Behind closed doors, the American delegation shared selected intelligence with key allies. the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Australia, and Canada. The reaction was mixed. British naval intelligence reportedly assessed the American analysis as compelling. Japan expressed concern about the precedent. Australia requested additional briefings. The IMO did not issue formal censure. The Maritime Safety Committee adopted a chairman's statement expressing concern about incidents that may undermine the universal obligation of maritime rescue. Language carefully calibrated to avoid naming either party. But the diplomatic damage was done. In ports across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa, the narrative solidified. The Americans refused to rescue a sinking ship. International maritime organizations debated whether force protection could ever legally override rescue obligations. Legal scholars published competing analyses. Naval War College professors assigned the case study to their students. And Iran had achieved something perhaps more valuable than sinking a destroyer. It had created a narrative, a story in which the world's most powerful navy watched a ship sink and did nothing. The fact that the ship wasn't actually sinking was a detail that didn't travel as far as the headline. Subscribe if you want to see how situations like these reshape the rules of naval engagement in the world's most dangerous waterways. The deeper question, the one that will shape naval operations in the Strait of Hormuz for years, is what happens next time, because there will be a next time, and it might be real. The IRGC has now established that the United States will hesitate before responding to a distress call in the Strait. That hesitation is a weapon. If an Iranian vessel genuinely catches fire, genuinely begins sinking, and genuinely needs rescue, will the next American commander believe it? Will the intelligence community be able to distinguish a real emergency from another ensnaring lure? And how long will that analysis take while sailors are in the water? The Truxtun's crew made the right call on March 8th. The intelligence was sound. The threat was real. Force protection was justified. But the next commanding officer facing the same decision might not have the same intelligence, might not have a P-8 overhead, might not have 19 minutes before they need to decide. They might have 90 seconds, a distress call, a burning ship on the horizon, and a standing order that says both protect your crew and rescue those in need. 2 orders, 1 moment, no good answer. The Sahand sits in Bandar Abbas today, operational, undamaged. Its crew never entered the water. Its fire was never confirmed by any external observer. And somewhere in IRGC naval planning cells, officers are studying the March 8th operation. What worked, what didn't, how to improve it, how to make the next deception more convincing, more dangerous, more impossible to distinguish from reality. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide, the narrowest choke point for global oil transit. 17 million barrels pass through it every day, and the rules governing who rescues whom in those waters just got a lot more complicated. The sea doesn't care about intelligence assessments or force protection protocols or diplomatic narratives. The sea just takes what it takes, and the next time someone calls for help in those waters, the only question that matters is whether anyone will come.